oh, Father, where is he? Father, oh, Father. Oh, Father.
Honorable members, let us pray. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to look with favor upon this Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in thy sight. Give divine guidance to the President of the Republic. Endow members of Parliament and ministers of state with discernment and vision, integrity and courage, that through the labors of government, this land and people may be well and truly served, and our good purposes for the common human life be realized in our midst. Amen. O God, grant us a vision of our country, fair as it might be, a country of righteousness, where none shall wrong his neighbor, a country of plenty, where evil and poverty shall be done away with, a country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service, and honor shall be given to the deserving, a country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people, that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of Ghana and Africa. Amen. But he's not the only. That doesn't mean his truth should not come. Honorable members, I have not received any message from His Excellency the President for today. And I don't also have any formal communication to the House today. And so we'll move on to item 4, which deals with correction of votes and proceedings and official report. We will start with the correction of votes and proceedings of Wednesday, 25th January 2022, page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page, yes, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Page 8, item 29. I was present yesterday, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
I now mention the page 8. Yes, the Honorable Member said she was present, and page 8 deals with those who were absent. So, table office, kindly take note. Page 9. Yes, Honorable Member, sorry.
Right, Honorable Speaker, page 8, item 36. I've been marked absent, but I was here yesterday. Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker.
Page 8.
Yes, table office, kindly take note of that. Page 9. Page 10. Yes, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday after Honorable Williams' wonderful statement on the Black Stars, a directive was issued by your deputy, directed at the Committee on Youth and Sports to investigate the cause of the poor performance of the Black Stars and report to the House, but with no timelines. Mr. Speaker, I suggest we give your committee some 2 weeks to report in view of the fact that Black Stars will be preparing to meet Nigeria between the 24th and the 29th of March, so that the views of the House through your report will be communicated as directed by Augusto. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, I think that is a very important observation by Honorable Patrick Boama, and the chair and ranking members of the committee, are they present here? They are not present. Is it possible that you can present this report by the end of February? Honorable members, I proceed to direct that the Committee on Youth and Sports should present to this House a report on the results of their investigation on the poor performance of the Black Stars by the end of February next month. Yes, Minority Leader.
I support the views expressed by the Honorable Patrick Boama, but the use of the word investigate, if he has no objection, review. Review was what the minister himself used, to review the performance of the Black Stars. But to say investigate can connote other meaning. Want to review the performance of the, I know I was not the owner of the statement, he's quoting, but since now it's your directive can use the word review instead of investigate.
Well, the problem we have here is that I wasn't present, but what is captured on the votes and proceeding is to investigate. That is there at page 10. That was a directive given by my first deputy speaker. He said to investigate the cause of the poor performance of the Black Stars and report to the House. So that is what we're going off. And I don't think actually it should be to review. I think they should investigate the cause. Yes, Majority Chief Whip.
Speaker, I think on this occasion I want to respectfully disagree with the minority leader. Review, abandon. Okay, if it is abandoned, then Speaker, you are spot on. Investigate is spot on. and is the rightful word to be used in this context. So, and I'm happy
office, kindly take note.
He's abandoned the word review.
Yes, kindly take note and correct the records accordingly. We are expecting that the report will be before this house before the end of February, so that we can deal with it and try to right the wrongs before the, if necessary, engage Nigeria for the qualifying match. If we deem it not necessary, we will say so. Honorable Minister for Employment and Labor Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want us to be very careful in setting the timeline in view of the fact that the Black Stars itself has a major World Cup qualifier in March, which they will need all the attention to prepare for that particular World Cup. So in setting a deadline of February ending, my fear is that it may interrupt in their preparation. So we ought to
Honorable Member, it is not fait accompli. Are you with me?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not wholly.
You didn't hear me.
I heard you right, Mr. Speaker, except that I thought we should give it a second thought.
It's subject to the recommendations and decisions of this House. The final one will be taken by His Excellency the President, but we're entitled to make an input in that decision of His Excellency the President. If we get to know that at the end of the day, we are not going to invest and get any benefits or yield from it, we won't do so. That's why I said it is not fait accompli that you have to engage in that match. We'll have to take the decision as a country. And I think it's very important. Ghana cannot be seen to be shining and all of a sudden from grace to grass. At least it has hurt our pride. And it's important we take a very serious view of it. And that's why the investigation. And so at the end of the day, this House will have the opportunity to discuss, debate it, and then we take a decision. Yes, Minority Leader.
Well, Speaker, just to indulge you, the Honorable Minister for Employment and Labor is among very few people who have voting rights, even at the GFA, as president of Nswatriman FC. I have the second vote with him as president of Steadfast. What Mr. Speaker is suggesting is not disagreeing with you. He's saying that we persuade the Honorable Patrick Buama that instead of February, you just put the deadline at 30th March, because we have a major March 23rd with Nigeria. And once these investigations are going, they'll be talking to technical bench management who must focus to get us qualified for Qatar 2022. So he's not disagreeing, Mr. Speaker, with your ruling. He's just saying that instead of February, say 30th March. I'm not sure the Honorable Patrick Buama will have an objection to that. Yes, investigate, but extend the period to 30th March, by which time that they would have played this critical tournament qualifier for the World Cup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thought I got the sense of the House saying that we should consider this matter before they engage with Nigeria as being stated. And that is why I gave the end of February. If it is that we are just doing it for the purposes of a long term, then, and that we don't want it to affect the already approved and decided program of the Black Stars, then let's say so. Then we can give the committee much more time. But really, I think that we should consider the matter before any further engagement of the Black Stars with any team towards whether qualifying for the World Cup or whether even ECOWAS or whatever. I don't engage in that matters that I know very well that I'm going to fail. No. Prevention is better than cure. Yeah, so we leave it as it is. Page 11. Yes, sir.
So, Speaker, can I refer you to rather page 10, item 8? Yesterday, before you withdrew, you recognized the presence of members of Parliament attending the CPA conference in Accra, Ghana. Even though the first Deputy Speaker repeated it, yours wasn't captured, but his was rather captured. I'm only seeking direction whether it shouldn't be the recognition you gave that should have been captured instead of the first Deputy Speaker.
Yes, actually, I did the recognition, not the first Deputy Speaker. Table office. Please, capture it properly. I did the recognition, not the first Deputy Speaker. You are right. Yes, Honorable Ablakwa, I saw you on your feet.
Yeah, most grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the
Honorable member, who is the one taking pictures in the... What is that? Who admitted you into the chamber? He is a stranger. Read your standing orders. He is a stranger to the house. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to clarify that item number 8 on page 10, yes, you earlier on had indicated that the CPA workshop was ongoing, and at some point you would go and join them for the closing ceremony. But when you left and the first Deputy Speaker took over, the delegation came to the public gallery and the first Deputy Speaker recognized them, actually asked them to be on their feet. And we all said our yeah to duly acknowledge their presence and to properly welcome them. So I think item number 8 is capturing what happened when the first Deputy Speaker acknowledged them during their visit at the public gallery. So this can stay, but we can also include the earlier statement that you made about the ongoing workshop and the closing ceremony, so that we will capture comprehensively what...
I think at a point of time you were missing the house. That's why you don't know that I did recognize them before I handed over. Not the earlier mention of it, but I went through the list as captured before I handed over to the first Deputy Speaker. If after that he also did recognize them and ask them to be on their feet for you to recognize their presence and to welcome them, that could further be captured by the table office. So both, they know how to do the wedding, so that at least it will show the importance we attach to hosting them in our country. We move to page 11, or say page 10. Page 11.
Yeah, right on, Speaker, please at page 11, item number 10, the motion. I seek your guidance. I would have thought that the motion will have made reference to the constitutional provision which you relied on. So if it doesn't hurt, we can add at the end of the first paragraph that this Honourable House constitutes an ad hoc committee composed of the following honourable members to recommend for appointment by Parliament an auditor to audit and report on the accounts of the Office of the Auditor General, pursuant to Article 187(15) of the Constitution. Because, Mr. Speaker, you stressed on the constitutional provision as the basis for the establishment of the committee, but that is omitted in this rendition. So if we could add pursuant to Article 187(15) of the Constitution.
Well, we are only asked that, told by our standing orders that the votes and proceedings should be a summary of the salient decisions of the House. As to how that summaries are captured, we've not been told. And so we just do it by practice. But what you just added will, I think, clarify it better to the ordinary person, that we are doing it on the basis of a constitutional injunction. And so adding pursuant to Article 187(15) of the Constitution will not do any harm to it. And I think they can add it. So table office kindly take note. Yes, page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 17. Sorry, page 16. Page 17. Honourable members, in the absence of any further corrections, the votes and proceedings of the second sitting held on Wednesday, 26 January 2022, are adopted as the true record of proceedings. The available majority leader in the person of the majority chief whip. Are we taking the urgent questions before we move to statements?
Speaker, yes, we should be taking the urgent questions.
Thank you. Honourable members, item 5, urgent questions. 5A, by the honourable member for Kwadaso, Honourable Dr. Kingsley Nyako. You may now ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, may I have the authority of Dr. Kingsley Nyako to ask this question?
Honourable member, you are completely out of order. You may resume your seat. Yes, Majority Chief Whip.
Speaker, with respect, I come under Order 68.3 and seek your leave for the question to be asked on behalf of Dr. Kingsley Nyako by the Honourable Member who just took.
Yes. Honourable Lady, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask the Minister for Food and Agriculture the measures the ministry has put in place to address the complaints of farmers about the unavailability and high prices of fertilizers, and to ensure the availability of fertilizers in the 2022 crop season. Thank you.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is common knowledge that since the inception of Planting for Food and Jobs in 2017, farmers enrolled on the flagship program have received consistent, affordable, and adequate supply of subsidized fertilizer until the last year, 2021, when issues of shortages arose. Several reasons accounted for this shortage, Mr. Speaker, and these are the adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on supply chains worldwide, including fertilizer, the resultant disruption of economic activities caused by the pandemic triggered sharp increases in prices of goods and services on the international market, including fertilizer, culminating in low imports by companies participating in government subsidy programs last year. 2, the general increase in freight charges by shipping lines due to the slowdown economic activity in the wake of the pandemic. 3, delays in the payment of supplies made by participating fertilizer companies during the 2020 cropping season. This affected the revolving capital of such companies and the financial capacity to import fertilizers for the PFJ program. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, inability of companies to secure credit facilities to finance their businesses due to the effects of the slowdown of economic activities on the financial sector. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding these challenges, the Ministry worked tirelessly in collaboration with participating companies to ensure availability of the subsidized fertilizers to farmers, albeit not always in desired quantities. Largely, this has ensured that the production of food crops in the country has been stable without adverse impact on the nation's food security. Mr. Speaker, the lessons learned on the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on economic activities call for pragmatic and innovative solutions to sustain the gains of the PhD campaign. Even before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, government had taken major steps to ensure local production of fertilizer and the encouragement of farmers to gradually shift to organic fertilizer, which is locally available. Frantic efforts are also being made to attract a multi-billion-dollar investment in a fertilizer manufacturing plant, which will rely on the surplus gas produced through offshore oil explorations for production. The government is also collaborating with OCP group of companies, a Moroccan conglomerate, to map soils in Ghana according to their nutrient and chemical composition. This will enable the use of blended fertilizers specific to soil types, promote efficient use of fertilizers, and increase productivity. Mr. Speaker, to eliminate any possible abuse of subsidized fertilizers facility, a farmer database has been developed with biometric information, a feature for tracking fertilizer bags, and a subsidy redemption solution with inbuilt security features such as deduplication, token verification, and biometric authentication before fertilizer subsidies are disbursed to farmers. To date, 1.2 million farmers have been registered in all regions within the northern belt of the country. A total of 3 million farmers have also been targeted for registration in the southern region of the country as soon as practicable. The database will ensure proper targeting of fertilizer and seed subsidy beneficiaries and prevent smuggling. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Lady, any supplementary question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the minister if the ministry has a specific plan of encouraging the use of organic fertilizer, promote and encourage the use of organic fertilizer. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The spike in fertilizer, global fertilizer prices in the last 18 months or so has shown us the urgency for ensuring that we cultivate the habit of applying organic fertilizer on our farms. We have laid out a program, Mr. Speaker, with our extension services to encourage farmers to do so. First of all, the advantage being on the health in terms of the environment is a much healthier product to use. It's much cheaper than the inorganic fertilizers that we are all used to. And then lastly, it encourages the use of byproducts like poultry, droppings and other such byproducts for maximum use on our farms. So yes, we have a program of promoting, and as you know, Mr. Speaker, farmers are very conservative in adopting to new methods. So we expect that in the next 2-3 years, we would have succeeded in convincing farmers that organic fertilizer will be a better option for them. Thank you.
Any further supplementary?
Oh, Mr. Speaker, I'm fine. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. So, honorable members, you are entitled to supplementary questions. So, yes, I agree. Minority Leader, yes.
Mr. Speaker, the minister in his answer was talking about payment for fertilizer. He knows that fertilizer suppliers have not been paid. When will they be paid? Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think the minority leader is talking history because that issue about non-payment of fertilizer which caused the shortage is resolved. So what we have at the moment is what is in the 2022 budget for this coming season. The amounts which are outstanding are supposed to be for 2021. And as we speak, companies are still submitting their invoices for us to go to the field to verify before we send them to the Ministry of Finance for payment. So that is the normal practice. But the outstandings which brought about the shortage were paid. Thank you.
Because you are minority leader, if not, you are entitled to only one supplementary. Yes, yes, Honorable.
I'm most grateful, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is the Minister responsible for Agriculture assuring this House that the answer he has given is applicable to commercial farmers, and that commercial farmers will have access to fertilizers they require for their farms?
Yes, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is very clear. The subsidized fertilizers are meant for smallholders. The commercial farmers are supposed to go on the open market. Mr. Speaker, there are two markets for fertilizer in Ghana. One is the subsidized fertilizer market, and then the open market for fertilizers. People bring in as many tons of fertilizer as they wish. But we are talking about those that the taxpayer is made to subsidize. And that is a market for smallholders. It's not meant for commercial farmers. Thank you.
Yes. The last supplementary.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Honorable Minister, you are reported to have
answered a question in this House on the 5th of August, 2021. In your response, you stated that the Ministry of Finance had released an amount of money representing 44% of the total debt paid fertilizer suppliers. Can you confirm if the rest of the debt has now been paid?
Well, I have nothing against him confirming, but he already alluded to that. But Minister, he wants a confirmation that you're not talking about the 44% release, but that now you are completely wiped off the debt owed fertilizer suppliers. Yes. So, Minister, you may do so.
Mr. Speaker, this is in respect of the outstanding debt of 2020. And as I had already mentioned, the 40% was the first tranche which was paid, which was settled, and subsequently the rest of it was settled for 2020. Thank you.
Hey, ranking member, you were caught by the bell, but being the ranking member, I'll give you the last bite.
Mr. Speaker, the question being answered by the Minister relates to availability and affordability of fertilizer. Mr. Speaker, we know one thing that seriously affects availability of fertilizers to farmers is smuggling of fertilizer. The officers in charge of the planting for food and jobs during the budget hearing reported to the Committee on Food and Agriculture that during their monitoring, Mr. Speaker, they saw donkeys cutting fertilizers with embossment, planting for food and jobs to Burkina Faso. Mr. Speaker, I want to know from the Minister, as part of the measures to ensure availability of fertilizers in our country, what has been done on that particular issue of donkeys being used to smuggle fertilizers meant for Ghanaian farmers?
Yes, Minister.
No, I think they didn't call because I'm almost always with them.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that this House is a House of records. I will challenge the member to produce the evidence at the committee stage which said that there was this donkey business. I never, that issue never came up at the committee stage. So if you can produce the record at which the official is quoted as talking about donkeys, then I will be in a position to answer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, Order 67-1, particularly 1B, must be taken into consideration when asking supplementary questions. So the issue he has raised is an issue that needs to be verified and proven. And he started by saying that this House is a House of record, and he's happy about that. Whether the committee can produce that record, because the committee is also part of the House. Anytime you get that record, you are at liberty to come back to the House. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister, in answering the question asked by Honorable Akando, made a distinction between commercial farming and non-commercial farming. Mr. Speaker, I will want the Minister to tell this House what the definition and the distinction is. Of commercial farming.
If you have the answer readily available, you may provide it. If not, I think it should be a substantive question, not a supplementary in view of the question on the order paper, where the focus is on fertilizer. But now you want a distinction between commercial farmers and non-commercial farmers, which will need some definition, including categories and other those. But if you have the answer available now, you may do so. If not, you are at liberty to go and get a comprehensive answer for him. That will not be an urgent question, because this one is an urgent question, and therefore you don't have the answer on the order paper. But if you ask a substantive, non-urgent question, we have the benefit of that comprehensive answer, which will be captured by our order paper. But Minister, if you have it, you may do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a very simple answer. By definition, a smallholder farm is one not more than 5 acres. In other words, 2 hectares. And that's the basis on which we plan the demand for fertilizer for smallholders. Thank you.
I will expect that there will be a substantive question on this matter, because the definition of commercial and small-scale farmers or non-commercial cannot only be limited to size of the farm or acreage. And so let's get it done. There are other things involved as to the value of investment, the cropping and the other type of inputs into farming. They must also be taken into consideration when we are looking at commercial and non-commercial farming. Yes, we have the next urgent question standing in the name of, let me be sure that, yes, the Honourable Member for Doma East, Honourable Paul Apreku Chum Berma, you may now ask your question.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable Speaker, I wish to ask the Minister for Food and Agriculture what the ministry is doing to assist poultry farmers who have been severely affected by the recent outbreak of bird flu, and what measures are being put in place to prevent the reoccurrence of this adversity. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, only yesterday, 2 days, precisely Wednesday, the 26th of January 2022, I held a press conference to provide an update on measures being taken by this government to contain the spread of the highly pathogenic avian influenza, otherwise known as bird flu. The question of compensation payment to farmers severely hit by the HPAI was addressed during an earlier engagement with the media in October 2021. The purpose of the engagement was to announce the unprecedented intervention by this government to contain the spread of the HPAI, restore and empower the Veterinary Services Directorate to discharge its mandate effectively. Government considered the intervention an imperative given the strategic role of the VSD in the development of the poultry and livestock industry. Mr. Speaker, as an update, I wish to present a report on the regional breakdown on the spread of the disease in the country. Information available to me on record indicate that a total of 10 regions out of 16 have so far recorded cases of HPAI. In all, 703,966 bird mortalities have been recorded in the affected regions. Of the said number, 555,227 birds had to be destroyed as part of containment measures by the ministry. The remaining 143,406 deaths were as a result of HPI infections. Thus far, the number of farms affected in the country is 159. Mr. Speaker, the ministry's action plan approved by Cabinet to stem the spread of the disease and address the institutional weaknesses of the Veterinary Services Directorate, VSD, include the following activities: the recruitment of 1,100 veterinary professionals for deployment throughout the country. Financial clearance to that effect has already been secured to cover the recruitment of an initial 550 veterinary professionals. The remaining 550 will be engaged within a period of 2 years to strengthen the institutional human resource capacity of the VSD. This has been lacking well before the government of His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo assumed office in 2017. Procurement of vehicles, motorbikes, chemicals, and other logistics has been approved by the government to revamp the VSD for enhanced operations manifested by effective surveillance, early detection, rapid response, and control of animal diseases. Intensification of farm visits to ensure biosecurity, depopulation, and disinfection to eliminate any threats to public health. All these activities will be preceded by the rollout of a comprehensive sensitization program nationwide by the end of the first week of February 2022. An implementation committee to coordinate the sensitization program and overseeing the general containment of the HPAI is set to be inaugurated tomorrow, Friday, the 27th January 2022. Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate that government has approved compensation payment to farmers affected by the HPAI as a component of the total approved budget of nearly 44 million Ghana cedis. At this stage, let me assure the House that the exercise will be carried out transparently to ensure justice for all. Finally, Mr. Speaker, to forestall the frequent recurrence of outbreaks of the HPAI and other transborder and animal diseases, government has finalized the Animal Health Bill for consideration of this Parliament. The passage of the bill will ensure effective regulation of livestock and poultry industry. The ministry, through the VSD, will be empowered to enforce management standards in all animal farms in the country. The introduction of a new legal framework will also vest authority in the VSD to certify all animal farms and also apply sanctions against recalcitrant farmers, such as closure of farms to serve as a deterrent to others. Mr. Speaker, if successfully implemented, these measures will go a long way to insulate the livestock and poultry industry from disease outbreaks and help build a robust and resilient animal sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Member, any supplementary? And the second Deputy Speaker will be taking the chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Honorable Speaker. And I think it is exciting to hear the Minister the good work they are doing on trying to tackle this issue. However, Honorable Speaker, on this one from the Minister for Outbreak, in 2015, there was a similar outbreak, and there was some compensation paid to some farmers. In my constituency, where my uncle, who is a farmer at Kobedia Supra, did not get such a compensation. Can the minister assure this house that every farmer who is affected by this bird flu will get part of this compensation, especially the good people of Doma East? I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the last time there was an outbreak of bird flu, I was a member of this august house, and in fact was the ranking member for Food and Agriculture and Cocoa Affairs Committee at the time. And I very well remember there were some compensations paid to some affected farmers and others were not paid. We received a few petitions at the time and we had the records at the ministry. Those who were not paid with the 2015 outbreak, there was an outstanding amount of about 2 million Ghana cedis. And we intend to settle that amount with a budget that has been approved by Cabinet for this exercise. Thank you.
Honorable members, Second Deputy Speaker to take the chair.
Yes. Yes, let's hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to find out from the Minister for Outbreak. Last year, when the outbreak occurred, I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Patrick Abaka, who is the director for I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Abaka, who is the Director for Veterinary Services, and he placed much emphasis on the cause as to how this outbreak has been occurring. And I remember he mentioning to the fact that the importation of poultry and poultry products is the cause for this outbreak. I want to find out from the minister, what is the ministry doing so that, one, you will be able to secure the safety from source, and two, safety when it gets to Ghana. That is if the ban has been removed. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member for Tafo, may you repeat the question, please?
Minister, I want to find out, last year, when the outbreak occurred, I had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Abeka, who is the Director of Veterinary Services. He placed much emphasis on the cause of the outbreak, that there is a serious problem with respect to the poultry and poultry products that are imported into the country. So I am saying, what is the ministry doing, one, with respect to safety at source, and two, safety when poultry and poultry products also get to the country?
Very well. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to draw the attention of this House to the fact that this outbreak in Ghana is not only in Ghana, it's all over West Africa. It's in Togo, it's in Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Nigeria. And not only in West Africa, it's also in Europe. It's in Russia, it's in Holland, and so on. So to pinpoint, to say the source where it came from into Ghana, it's very difficult to say. So I wasn't at this event that the veterinary officer was speaking, but it will be difficult for me to make a comment on that, knowing that the outbreak is regional rather than specifically to Ghana from one source. Thank you.
Very well. Honourable members, the minister has answered the question, and therefore we will discharge the minister. Minister, we thank you for attending upon the House to answer questions. You are hereby discharged.
Speaker, a statement was admitted by Right Honourable Speaker. I think a colleague on the other side is billed to make the statement. So, Speaker, if you may permit him to present his statement.
Very well. Let me invite Honourable Member for New Biase, Honourable Adam Abdul Salam, to make a statement on accommodation crisis in our public universities. Honourable Member, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make a statement on the accommodation crisis in our public universities. Mr. Speaker, during the recess, a constituent whose daughter had gained admission to study at the University of Ghana requested that I help her daughter secure accommodation after they had been unsuccessful in their online application. Mr. Speaker, I wondered why they should take the Member of Parliament, the intervention of a Member of Parliament, to find a place for a prospective student. Nonetheless, I offered to help. Mr. Speaker, to my surprise, and a precursor to this statement is my experience on the morning of January 6, 2022. On that day, I visited the campus of the University of Ghana together with a student and her father, who had traveled all the way from New Biase to begin their search for accommodation on campus. Mr. Speaker, all attempts at meeting the traditional hall authorities to put forward a request were unsuccessful. Mr. Speaker, it took us over 6 hours of waiting for a manager of one of the hostel facilities on campus to finally find a slot for my constituent. When I was leaving the manager's office at around 4:40 p.m., there was still a queue of desperate students and their parents waiting to have an audience with the managers of the hostel. Mr. Speaker, as I stepped out in the hallway, one parent who had accompanied her child from Kumasi in search of accommodation approached me and said, and I quote, "Gentlemen, I don't know why, but something just told me to speak to you. Maybe you could help. I have been here since 6 a.m. in search of accommodation for my daughter. I have waited to see the manager, but they keep saying he's busy. Please help me, as I don't know what to do now," unquote, she stated as she shed tears. Mr. Speaker, whilst I was trying to console the frustrated parent, another parent came up to me and lamented, "I gained admission here in 1998. I had challenges with finding accommodation for myself on campus. 24 years on, My son is still facing similar problems. What kind of a system are we running in this country? She asked. Mr. Speaker, I continue to stay in touch with these parents and their wards, and it took more than 1 week for them to secure accommodation. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure there are many depressing stories of how students struggle to find accommodation in our various public universities in the country. Mr. Speaker, the current arrangement in some of our public universities are that after paying tuition, students are required to apply and secure accommodation online. Mr. Speaker, this arrangement does not often work for many students, especially those in rural areas. Mr. Speaker, to access the online portals, one needs fast and reliable internet, which is a challenge in many parts of the country. Even for those in our urban areas, the reports are that rooms are usually unavailable by the time students get the notification to log on to the portals. Mr. Speaker, the cost of accommodation on campus is too high for the average parent. Currently, apart from the traditional halls, the average residential fee ranges between a little below 2,500 cedis to 12,000 Ghana cedis for an academic year. This development makes it difficult for students from poor families to enroll. Mr. Speaker, as enrollment increases in our public universities, the only logical thing for the government to do is to provide adequate facilities to accommodate the growing student population. Mr. Speaker, the government must also enhance the build, operate, and transfer concept as it pertains in some public universities. This would serve as an incentive to encourage the private sector in helping to solve the accommodation crisis. Mr. Speaker, when accommodation facilities are expanded, the government, through university councils, must put measures to curtail the rise in illegal selling of bed spaces in our various public universities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Honorable Minister, I'll come to you, but let's listen to other members first. Yes, Honorable Ranking Member for Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Member for Adubiase constituency for this informative statement. It is true that accommodation, especially residential accommodation for students, is becoming a very critical issue in our tertiary institutions, especially the traditional universities. We know very well that now we have 15 public universities and then about 10 technical universities in the country. What is happening is that year on or year by year, this crisis of accommodation faces us as students get into the first year. We know very well that some of the universities introduced a system of in, out, out, in. That is, for the first year, you will get accommodation in the traditional halls. Second and third year, you are out. Then in the final year, you come back into residence in the traditional halls. But it is becoming very, very difficult for some students, especially the first year students, to get accommodation in the traditional halls. I know a member of parliament here this year who had it very difficult to even get places for his 2 wards at the University of Ghana. And these are first year students who, by the arrangement of the university itself, should give them accommodation. Mr. Speaker, the challenge we are having is that we are not being progressive enough to make sure that every year, at least the public universities put up or expand the existing accommodation for students. The universities have given that role to private individuals who put up hostels and charge students exorbitant fees. That is unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, what is also not helping us in this country is a number of abandoned residential accommodation facilities for students in our schools or universities. If government, through the GET Fund, should release money regularly to GTEC, that is the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission, I am sure these facilities would have been completed and made available for students, especially the first year students. So I am of the view, Mr. Speaker, that we urge the government, through the Minister of Education, to make sure that funds are released to the GTEC regularly, so that they can also support the tertiary institutions to make sure that they complete these projects. You go to the public universities now and you see a lot of projects standing uncompleted. Residential accommodation, office accommodation, laboratories, everything has come to a standstill. So if government is not helping in this direction, we will still have these challenges facing us in the public universities or tertiary institutions. So, Mr. Speaker, I agree very well with the maker of the statement that there is a need for the Ministry of Education to engage management of public universities in the country and see how best, with the little resources that they get, they can, within a very short time, complete these facilities so that students, especially the first year students or level 100 students, don't face these challenges. Because if as a first year student, you have to pay fees of about 2,000, 3,000 for registration, and only to look about another 6,000 or 5,000 to pay for residential accommodation in a private hostel. In fact, it will prevent a lot of people from accessing tertiary education. So, Mr. Speaker, I will urge that government takes up this as a serious responsibility to make sure that funds are made available to the tertiary institutions to complete their projects so that our students who could not afford private hostels should be able to get universities accommodation in the tertiary institutions, especially the traditional halls, so that we can reduce the burden that faces them every academic year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me invite member for Southon. K2 South, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to applaud my colleague for this timely statement, especially because in the 1 year that I've been blessed to be the Member of Parliament for K2 South, I've had many new students complain to me about accommodation. Additionally, many from the previous year who sought to abandon their courses because they couldn't afford accommodation is very high in my constituency. I recall that sometime in the 2000s, we had the in, out, out, in policy. Between then and now, it will be useful to hear what we have done to address that deficit that we have in the accommodation of students. We cannot seek to want to improve on education, allow students who have sometimes very poor grades sail through the senior high school, only for them to have a difficulty of continuing the education, mainly because we have failed them in providing for accommodation. It is possible for us as a country to decide that to make it possible for the people in the rural communities who want to break the cycle of poverty through education, to have it easy and to provide accommodation. One of the ways in which I think we can address this is to give some incentives for the association that builds for so-called middle class. If we can assist them to build more, I am sure that we'll be able to absorb some of these students so they can indeed acquire the education that they need to break the cycle of poverty. We must stop the lip service. We must put our money where our mouths are. We must ensure that we take the steps that really do address the needs of these students. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes. Let me come to Honorable Member for Busa South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I commend the maker of the statement very highly. Mr. Speaker, the challenges that our educational sector is facing today can best be described as unprecedented. Mr. Speaker, as we speak about the challenges that students who have enrolled in our public universities are facing with regards to inadequate and sometimes non-existent accommodation, we must put on record that academic work has come to a standstill as a result of legitimate industrial action being undertaken by the University Teachers Association of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, given that not long ago I was a member of UTA, and given my relationship with the academic community, one would have thought that I wouldn't have faced a challenge getting a son and a nephew accommodation on campus. Unfortunately, even I, of the academic community, I have not been able to get accommodation for constituents and even family members. Mr. Speaker, this is a testimony of the magnitude of the challenge. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, we have 15 public universities. And according to documentation from GITA, which is the Ghana Tertiary Education Committee, as at 2020-2021, we had 332,786 students enrolling in our public universities, So, Speaker, this is a 5% increase as far as the student population is concerned. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note that during the budget estimates and the budget presentations made by various sectors, GTEC, in appearing before our committee, noted key issues challenging teaching and learning at the universities. 1, slow expansion of academic infrastructure. 2, increasing student-teacher ratio, threatening quality of education service delivery. 3, recruitment and replacement of staff not keeping pace with enrollment. Mr. Speaker, just last year, when we looked at the estimates and wrote our report and presented it to your good self, it was very clear that the funding for tertiary education clearly did not make enough provision for capital expenditure. In this 2022 budget, the total amount allocated for CAPEX was 866,179,923. Clearly, the student population is increasing. The second cohort of this pre-senior school program has now entered the university, and yet we are not keeping pace in the expansion of academic and residential facilities. This is why we are where we are. And these are some of the reasons. That members of UTA have stated, since they have to sacrifice to deal with small lecture halls, an increased number of students, and indeed a very slow ICT infrastructure, and the lack of teaching and learning aids. Mr. Speaker, this clearly is as a result of poor planning. And I remember fully well that in 2018, the wise Asantehene Otunfuo admonished government to start making preparation at the tertiary level for obvious reasons. The students that had increased in numbers at the secondary level were eventually going to go to the tertiary level. That has not happened. So this conundrum, this situation, although not new, has been exacerbated as a result of poor planning. So, Mr. Speaker, I would want to recommend that we consider other options, build and operate and transfer. We can look at the private sector and bring them in. There are various models that we can adopt to try and resolve this problem. Because there are many students who are not being able to take up their places at the universities, not because they don't have the competence or they have not passed, because they have parents who cannot pay 2,000, 3,000 Ghana cedis per semester. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me.
Yes, let me invite Honourable Member for Manson Quanta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving the opportunity to express my view on this statement made by our colleague at the other side from FJC, here. Mr. Speaker, per government policy on free access program, it has encouraged more parents and students to go in for the tertiary education, upgrade themselves, and make them competent enough to seek jobs and offer better skills to Ghana's development. In the process, the universities are also challenged to offer admission to these students when they graduate from the SS programs, to the extent that most public universities are now engaging private admission, whereby they try to also improve their revenue from these intakes. However, if you look at the private engagement, no provisions are made that to attract this private engagement, but they also rely on the public universities facilities to engage these private students, which means that at the onset, you can see for yourself that the shortage of facilities to engage these students for academic work will be at a serious challenge. Mr. Speaker, based on these limitations, it will be proper for the public universities to adopt a proper planning and budgeting, whereby the admissions intake and available space for this admission should match with the facilities and accommodation that they have. And if there's any differences or limitations, there should be proper planning which will ensure that they make good use of their limited resources to engage students to do their academic work. Suggestion should be that the universities should, through the differences that they get from matching their admission vacancies to the facility they have, to engage private sector, as suggested by other colleagues, to ensure that they invest, provide parcels of land and go into partnership to provide more of these facilities to help our students go into the academic work at the tertiary institution. Secondly, it will also be advisable for the university to use part of their IGF, that is the Internal General Fund, to set aside a good portion to help the building of these facilities to accommodate these students in pursuing their academic work. Furthermore, it will be necessary for the universities to engage other stakeholders, including the government, to plan ahead of time. Say every year, when they are going to make the admissions, they should know the available space that they have in terms of facilities to match the admission intake. And at the same time, they should have a plan ahead of time for, say, 4 years of the admission requirements and availability, and then plan ahead of time. So based on this, before they admit students, they know the limitations and the strength that they have and plan towards that engaging the private sector, engaging the government, and making sure that whatever they make in their IGF, they make provision to help the students who are coming in to have the comfort and then prepare themselves very well to acquire the tertiary education that they require. I'm very grateful to you, Honorable Speaker, and to members who also put in this event. I'm very grateful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Honorable Kijuto, then I come to you.
I'm most grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this very important statement, which has been very eloquently delivered by my honorable colleague. Mr. Speaker, this is a challenge that is clearly self-inflicted. We should have had a foresight to prevent this from happening. As we speak, our students who have done all this nation expects of them to study hard, to pass their exams, and to meet the entry requirements into these universities. They have done their part. The leadership of our country, the authorities, quite clearly are letting them down. Mr. Speaker, it is heart-wrenching as members of Parliament to receive distress calls from our constituents about how stranded they are, having gained admission into public universities, often, Mr. Speaker, arriving in those communities for the first time in their lives. Somebody has carried out all his pre-tertiary education in North Town, for example, from pre-basic, basic, junior high, senior high, and arrives at KNUST for the first time in his or her life. Typically, a teenager or a 20-year-old, and he's told that, yes, you registered for your academic entry, but as for the residential, you are on your own. Fend for yourself. Mr. Speaker, this is totally against the spirit and letter of our Constitution. Article 25C of our Constitution makes tertiary education a right. Higher education is a right. And this is not how rights should be made available to our students. Mr. Speaker, as you go through the history of higher education, since the first public university was established in 1948, we see all the amenities, we see the provisions that were made, where students were sleeping one in a room. Students were fed 3 square meals. There were time for dining. And they learned the etiquette of using cutlery and all of that. These days, Mr. Speaker, dining is no more. No provision of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Dining halls have become reading rooms. Some have been converted to crowded dormitories. Some rented to churches for revival services. Over the years, it will appear we have let the younger generation down, and this cannot continue. I recall, Mr. Speaker, that when we were at the Ministry of Education and had meetings with the National Council for Tertiary Education, as it was known then, we all agreed that as for first years, once you get your admission, it should be an in, out, in policy. If it's acute, it can be in, out. But as for first year, they are vulnerable. They are probably arriving in the region. Say you attended school in Accra all your life. Then you gain admission to UDS in Tamale or Navrongo for the first time. So as for your first year, we said the policy should be in, out, in. Because final years, you need to also be supported to finish adequately. But worst case scenario, we agreed it should be in, out. How is it that now first years who are in such a vulnerable category are left on their own? And Mr. Speaker, I've been looking at the data. Our higher education gross enrollment is still described by UNESCO as elitist. We have not attained 30% yet. So if we are grappling with these challenges, with this seeming crisis, with accommodation, when we are still in the elitist category, then you can imagine what will happen if we get to the 30% that UNESCO is calling on countries to work towards, so far as the higher education gross enrollment ratio is concerned. Mr. Speaker, I have also been looking at recent expenditure trends in education. UNESCO has said that to assess the seriousness of governments should spend a minimum of 4 to 6% on education as share of GDP. Mr. Speaker, the sad reality is that Ghana's GDP on education as share of education expenditure, Mr. Speaker, has been on the decline. In 2021, Mr. Speaker, by UNESCO data, we did 3.0%, way below the minimum 4 to 6%. 2020, we did 3.3%. 2019, we did 3.5%. Indeed, it's only in 2018 that we met this target of 4.0%. 2017, it was 3.6%. Historically, Ghana has always been within the 4 to 6%. In 2011, we recorded the highest performance under Professor Mills, God bless his soul, of 8.1%. GDP share on education expenditure. So clearly, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Honorable Dr. Park that we are where we are because of lack of investment in the sector. We are not releasing resources to the universities to run. These days, we only pay their salaries, the salaries of teaching and non-teaching staff, and then we leave them to fend for themselves. The GET fund remains capped and mortgaged. And I recall as student leaders, as NUC's president, we insisted that GET fund is just to supplement, is not to be the mainstay. And we all acknowledge that government did not have adequate resources at the time and needed a booster. And that is why, per the Akosombo Accord, we proposed the Ghana Education Trust Fund. But sadly, the hope that we all had in the GET fund has whittled away. It's been capped, it's been capitulated, and it's been mortgaged. So we are not investing in higher education. And that is why we are where we are. I will appeal as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, to my respected colleague, the Honorable Minister for Education, that it is not too late to send out the directive which we did when we were in power, that for first years, they should be taken care of. let's return, at least for now. The short-term solution is that in, out, or in, out, in. As for in for first year, it should be compulsory. I think a directive should go out because we are seeing a lot of profiteering going on. Some people in management are taking advantage of the situation, and we cannot keep exploiting the younger generation. We had things better. We should make things even better for those who come after us. Sadly, in this country, we inherit good and we leave the place worse off for those coming after us. No country can develop that way. And the generation coming after us will load us if things continue in this manner, if this trend continues. Education is a right, higher education is a right, it's still elitist per UNESCO classification, and we should not be grappling with the challenges that confront us. So a directive should go, at least for first years, it should be in, they find their feet in the first year, and then they can make some arrangements. While at that, we should have an interim solution where government invests in the sector. Doing 3% of GDP on education cannot continue. It is below the international benchmark. It is below the international matrix, the gold standard. We must return to the era of serious investment in education because that is the bedrock. Without quality education, without access, without quality, without equity, we cannot develop as a people and will be wasting the talent that God has blessed us with. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity, and I commend the maker of the statement.
Yes, honorable member for trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to comment on the statement. Mr. Speaker, the situation is in, out, in. I have my brother's son who entered at KNUST. I have constituents who entered at various universities that we are supporting. And all of them, when they brought their admission, their accommodation for the first year is in. I say so for a fact. Mr. Speaker, the issue, the argument about being self-inflicted and the argument about SHS students having SHS students. You see, Mr. Speaker, when the other side is speaking, we keep quiet and listen. When they are speaking, we keep quiet and listen. So please, listen. Mr. Speaker,
honorable members, please.
Mr. Speaker, the argument of it being self-inflicted and the argument of SHS students having done their part, as if education being a stakeholder share responsibility has ended. It hasn't. If you enter a tertiary institution, it doesn't mean that education being a shared responsibility of stakeholders has ended. Mr. Speaker, 20 years ago, the policy was to decouple admission from accommodation. 20 years ago. That was the policy. And as a result, private sector was supposed to play a major role as best practice as everywhere. Mr. Speaker, yes, the growth of the numbers indicates that going forward, we should be doing our best to ensure that we solve the problems. But please, let us avoid politicizing education and making statements as if people want to take advantage of scoring undue points. And that is what we should be doing in this house. That is what we should be doing in this house. I'm saying that 20 years ago, the policy was to decouple admission from accommodation so that accommodation will not be a challenge or to stop enrollment in increasing numbers.
20 years ago, Article 25(2) of our Constitution allows private participation in our education system. So the private sector is supposed to also to be encouraged to play a role. Now, as I'm saying that along the line that we do all this, we should manage such that the private sector will play a role, and the students who also need support should be supported. The in-out policy was not today's policy. It was to face the challenge and address it. Mr. Speaker, GET Fund is doing its best. You know, the colleges of education, because they were upgraded to tertiary status, became incumbent on government to increase accommodation at the colleges of education. You go there today, you see story buildings being put up at the colleges of education for accommodation. Mr. Speaker, let me say it well and bluntly. Successive governments have done their best in managing our tertiary education and ensuring that the numbers at least are captured so that we go forward. It shouldn't be looked at. A statement should not be made self-inflicted. Today, government is not doing ABCD and bringing in such argument today. As I speak to you, I have given you examples.
Honourable member, before you conclude, honourable member for Bongo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can admire the passion with which my colleague is speaking, but he indicates that about 20 years ago there was government policy, or there was a policy to decouple accommodation from admission. Luckily enough, 20 years ago I was the National News President, and there was no policy like that. There's no document, there's no policy like that. So for him to state that there was a policy 20 years ago, luckily enough, I was then leading students of Ghana, and that's not true.
Honourable member, we are not debating here. There is contribution. There is contribution to a statement made by member. So, honourable member, please conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I thought with all humility, you were going to tell him to have been out of order, because he's blatantly out of order. He could be a new student and wouldn't know the policy. He could. Maybe at his time, all he was doing was hooliganism and following students and be hooligan. Maybe at his time, that is what he did as a leader. But Mr. Speaker, I am saying that was it. These in, out, in issues. So when we are to, let me also say that we've managed as a government to make the free SHS. Why? Because though the Constitution says that even gradually tertiary education be made free, but once we hold parents at the SHS level, it is us to also let parents understand that once your ward is getting free SHS, please try and also save something small towards your child's tertiary education. Why are we doing student transload? Why are we making sure GMPC have stopped sponsoring Blackstar and making scholarship for science students? It is all to make sure that the needy get the opportunity going to school. But let me repeat it, that we should stop politicizing education and let's say it as it is. In, out, in is still being implemented. The policy to decouple admission from accommodation.
Yes. Honourable member, have you concluded? Very well, then conclude for me to come to the
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Those who didn't want me to conclude, I will conclude. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I am saying that that was the policy. And as a result, we should all look at the issues, work together, and ensure that tertiary education continue to benefit our people. And as much as the number increases, let's encourage the system and ensure that accommodation issues is looked at. But we cannot decouple private sector from playing a role. And whatever has to be done, we have to do it. And let's stop politicizing education for just winning political points. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very well. Let me come to leadership. You may yield to, if you wish. Okay, honorable member for Temari Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, leader, for yielding that opportunity to me to contribute. But before I make any statement, it ought to be stated, and stated in an unequivocal terms, that there has never been a policy, and at the time in reference, there was no such policy, and there has never been a policy. Mr. Speaker, it is interesting to note that at this side, we can boast of about 5 former student leaders of this country. At that time, I was a leader of University Students Association of Ghana, and the following year I became the Secretary General of the All Africa Students Union. Honorable Okujeto has been a NUCS president. Honorable Edward Bauer, at the very time he was talking about, was the NUCS president. When we said there wasn't any policy, instead of him humbly withdrawing and apologizing to the generality of the people of this country, more so those students who are affected, some of whom are sleeping by people's homes because they do not have accommodation, he doubled down. This house is a house of record, and let it be captured that there has never been any policy like that. And if there is any, I challenge my honorable friend to share me with any document that is suggesting that there was a policy like that. The interesting aspect of it is that the very people who are affected are the people who are from poor homes. The very people who are affected are those who are from far places. Mr. Speaker, when I went to University of Ghana in 1999-2000 academic year, 1990, by then I had finished teacher training college. You were in primary school. At the time when we were student leaders in 2000, you were in JSS1. When I went to the university at the time, Mr. Speaker, people had the opportunity to choose their halls. Today, there are halls that are full, there are private hostels in our campuses, and every single member of parliament here, perhaps except you, who wouldn't have had calls from their constituents asking them to pay for exorbitant fees for their constituents to be accommodated. I had the opportunity to have gone to University of Ghana campus myself to see how best I can help people to get accommodation. It is just unacceptable. It is absolutely unacceptable. Look, I think that I refer my friend to go to Article 25 of the 1992 Constitution, which was the argument we all made as student leaders, that education should be progressively free. It is the responsibility of every government to ensure that we do not make education only free at the senior high school. I think that what is also critical is that it should be made accessible at the university. What benefit will it be to this state when I have free education at SHS, yet I cannot proceed because I do not have money to pay fees? I cannot proceed because I do not have accommodation. Imagine a student who is coming from my village in Zhang. That student knows no one in Accra. Then the student comes here, no accommodation for such a student. Psychologically, he or she wouldn't have the mental stability to study. Such a person, no matter how brilliant he or she is, will not be able to study very well because accommodation is quite known to the success of every student in any tertiary institution. I think that we need to look at it holistically. I agree with him that we must not politicize this, but I urge him to just take a walk. As a matter of fact, the distance between this place and University of Ghana campus, perhaps the city campus is not far. I challenge my friend tomorrow to just spend 1 hour, take a walk to the campuses and see the harrowing conditions under which our sisters, our brothers, our nieces and nephews are going through in these campuses. When lectures have begun, when others have the luxury to pay 3,000 Ghana cedis per semester to occupy a hostel, on campus. Others do not even have money to buy food. How could they be thinking of having money to pay for hostel accommodation? So it is a challenge that has confronted us for a very long time. And the earlier we stop this politicking with it, as my friend suggested to do, even with facts that are not available, and look at this issue as an issue that confronts us. No nation can ever be developed without first and foremost looking at the human resource base of that nation. And the pot with which we can have this enormous human resource base is the tertiary institutions. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this statement, only to point out that I urge my honorable friend to do the most honorable by writing to the Hazard Department that he peddled falsehood on the floor of Parliament, which ought not be captured, because this is a house of record. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me come to majority leadership. Yes, then, Honorable Minister, you may conclude, taking into consideration all what you've heard.
Right, Honorable Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. I also want to commend my colleague, Honorable Abdulsalam Adams, for making this statement here. Mr. Speaker, I've heard the issues that have been brought up in terms of policy, in terms of practice, and what takes place in terms of student accommodation. I'm glad my honorable colleague was able to get accommodation for his constituents, and I'm grateful to KNUST for the assistance that they provided to him whilst he was there on the campus. You see, there are times when you may have an issue of limited supply, or you may also have a management problem on your hands. If I listen to the comments of my colleagues, I can see there is something in between the two. That students are manually going around looking for facilities. Whereas if the system was built up in such a way that you can select online before you get there to make sure accommodation was provided, will eliminate some of these problems. So I work with the universities to look at the best way forward in terms of ensuring that we have a proper management system in place so that students have to go to campus on the first day of school opening to look for spaces manually. The good news is that having heard of any students who could not attend KNUST or any other university for that matter because there was no accommodation, I also understand the frustration of parents if they have to go there and physically be present before they can find accommodation for their wards. My honorable colleague referred to the fact that this challenge has been there for 24 years. The challenge that we confront today must end. And I had various suggestions, the other things that the ministry is doing, promoting, build, operate, and transfer, as was suggested by my honorable colleagues. We've looked at the tertiary education space. Some funding has been made available, for example, for colleges of education, over 400 million allocated to them to build hostels. Now we are moving on to the public universities to help complete some buildings that have been there, structures that has been there for years, sometimes about 20 years. We are looking at ways where we can complement the efforts of the private sector, sometimes through credit enhancement, through support from GET Fund, so that these facilities will be completed to remove the challenges our parents may go through and our young ones and our wards may go through during the first week of opening of school. I want to take this opportunity on the floor of this parliament to congratulate and to thank universities like UPSA for the innovative manner with which they'll be able to handle the accommodation challenges, building residential halls through their own IGF. I also want to commend EUW for the work they've done there, the various residential facilities they've built through their IGF so that they can accommodate our students who attend those institutions. I think together, when we bring together the university and bring together the private sector, we will be able to find a solution that has eluded us for many, many years. And once and for all, when students are reporting to the first day in their various campuses, whether there's a policy or no policy, whether there's a practice or no practice for in, out, they will get opportunities to select their residential halls and be able to go in with their luggages and settle down to begin their academic work. Mr. Speaker, thank you for a wonderful opportunity. I'll end by thanking all my colleagues for the great suggestions they proffered, and I'm taking notes. We'll put it to work and come back here next time with solutions. And we're waiting at the solutions, and there will be no acrimony between us. Thank you.
Yes, honourable member, we've come to the conclusion of statement, and we move to item number 7. Slated for tomorrow. What's the date? Tomorrow. Yes, leader, are you moving to item number 7?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we'll do just 7A. Item 7A.
Very well.
And if members will indulge me, I will just do for the minister responsible for transport.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is no objection, but leaders should make sure that his ministers are here to lay the papers. So, which minister education, or you do it yourself? Mr. Speaker, does he understand what is that?
7A.
Do you know cabotage? And you want to lay a paper on cabotage for Minister for Transport. Do you carry containers? I know you carry engines in Swami, not ships. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Ghana Shipping Carriage of Containers Regulations 2021.
Honourable members, the regulation has been duly presented. It will refer to the Committee on Subsidiary Legislation for consideration and report. Yes, leadership.
Speaker, I believe we can't take an adjournment now, except to remind members that the directive by the Speaker that members submit to the booster is not being followed to a letter by members, unfortunately. My information is that, as of yet, only 89 of us members have submitted. And that is not encouraging at all. The people administering the vaccine would believe they were supposed to leave today. We are pleading with them to extend their stay by 1 day. That is up to tomorrow. And if we don't submit ourselves by close of day tomorrow, Speaker, it will be difficult to really enforce what the Speaker alluded to, that members may not be permitted to enter the presence of Parliament without showing any indication
that they have had the 2 vaccines, the AstraZeneca that we submitted ourselves to, plus this booster. Members should resolve to protect themselves and also protect the rest of us. So, Mr. Speaker, my plea is that members should submit themselves. 89 out of 275 is not encouraging at all. Mr. Speaker, my information is also that the staff, I don't have the relevant numbers, but the staff as well, we have less than 1/2 of them who have submitted themselves. And so, Mr. Speaker, let the staff also submit themselves, plus the media personnel who are also with us. Information reaching me is that you have also not all submitted. So please, you are part of it. You are part of the family. So those of you up there, please submit yourself so that all of us will be covered come the end of tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, to support the leader that members, as much as possible, should avail themselves. The parliamentary service workers who are supporting the clerk, as much as possible, they can engage themselves. But to ask that there should be extension of it. If the numbers are low, they should be willing to do a day or 2 more. But to say that tomorrow is cut-off date, that may be problematic. But we will be encouraged to go in for the booster. Mr. Speaker, I think now we should adjourn for tomorrow.
Mr. Speaker, I omitted to add the other officers in the House, which would include the security personnel. They are also entitled to the administration of the booster. They should also submit themselves.
Thank you very much. On that note, you'll bring the curtains down and adjourn the House to tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the forenoon. Honourable members, the House stands adjourned.